Hello and welcome to another episode of AWS on Stack Overflow. My name is John Rotenstein. I'm a developer advocate. I had to think about that. Developer advocate at AWS. We used to be called technical evangelists. We are now advocates for all you folks who are developers using AWS. So welcome to my show. This is where I get to answer Stack Overflow questions live with your help. Or if you have any questions, we can try and answer these things together. So hello to everyone out there. Where are you joining in from? I'm transmitting at the moment from Sydney, Australia. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. A nice day. It's starting to warm up after a bit of winter days. I'd love to hear where all of you folks are viewing from today. So Northampton United, UK. Northampton. Where is that? That is Northampton. Everyone gets a personal zoom in from Google Maps today. Fantastic. Zoom out a bit there. Oh, excellent. A little bit out in the countryside near Coventry. Fantastic. New York. Fantastic. Sort of an evening show for those of you in New York. Excellent. Mexico again. Hey, Acor. I had you on yesterday. Fantastic. So a bit of a more relaxed show today. We can have a bit of a play around. Any other fancy people from around the world? I love how Google Maps these days does this correct view of how the world actually rotates. So as you zoom in on bits of the world, it all has this funny rotation aspect. That's fantastic. You know, what Google has done for maps for the world is just amazing. Saudi Arabia, Finland, Chicago. Whereabouts in Saudi Arabia? Near Bahrain, we have, of course, our region in Bahrain, which is quite wonderful. I wonder how many availability zones they really have in that area, because it doesn't look that big. We go to the AWS Global Infrastructure page in Jeddah. Jeddah has proposed to apply for a science fiction convention in 2022, and it's called JediCon. I think it's so they don't have to do copyright avoidance over the word Jedi, but it's going to be held in Jeddah. So good luck for, actually, I think they didn't get it. I think Chicago got it. So that good luck might not be that useful. So Worldcon 2022. The Worldcon is the World Science Fiction Convention around the world, which was just held in Wellington last week. I helped make some of the Hugo Awards that were done there. And 2020, it's all out of date, but I think Chicago got 2022. Finland, not US. Okay, Jeddah, where were we? Jeddah is... Jeddah. Oh, of course, I was in Bahrain. So Saudi Arabia on that side. Oh, okay, all the other way side over there. I was trying to figure out where the AWS Bahrain region as it's the first region in the Middle East. Look at the region table. Swiss Alpines. Let me guess, you are coming from Switzerland, maybe? Okay, these are the ones that have the various services in Bahrain. I want to see how many regions there are. Regions and AZs. Middle East. Here we are. 3 availability zones. That is quite amazing that they managed to fit 3 availability zones in what appears to be a rather small territory here. So maybe they've shoved one right down the bottom, one shoved one right up the top, etc. Fantastic. Boston, yeah, Swiss Alpines is in Boston. Excellent. Okay, let's talk AWS type things. In fact, I wanted to give a shout out to some of the viewers that we often have in here, the top answerers on AWS questions, especially to Chris Williams and Marcin, who have been doing an amazing job of late. The last 30 days, 366 answers provided, 310 answers provided. Just incredible. It's great to see a lot of the jelly coming up there in the stakes. Stefan, who joins us for a lot of CQ episodes. Thank you very much. I actually have some queries in, there's a thing called data.stackexchange.com where you can run queries against the data behind Stack Overflow. And I ran some queries here for the last 6 months. Marcin did 1,000 answers, though he only joined fairly recently. Chris Williams joined recently as well. So great having all those answers through. I would love to see a lot of you doing lots of answers out there as well. Stockholm is the closest region, says Tech Stories. So have you seen the fancy 3D graph that we provide these days of where the infrastructure is? Make sure your machine has lots of CPU or GPUs, and you can run this very pretty graph that shows not only where all the regions are, but where the various data links are available. So if we zoom here in Bahrain, now it looks like the availability zones are in the ocean off the coast of Bahrain. I don't know how that works. I'm down here in Australia somewhere. Where did Australia go? Yay! So we've got a few links. That's interesting. It's showing links going up to Tokyo. But where does Tokyo connect to? And how does Tokyo connect to the USA? I have no idea what all of these lines mean. Fantastic. But it's very sexy graphics. Okay. So congratulations to you all. Would love to see you answering more, participating more on Stack Overflow. Hopefully I can show you how to do it. So let's begin by calling up some recent questions and see if any recently added questions are good. Otherwise, I've marked a few questions earlier today that looked a little bit interesting to discuss things on AWS. What was that view just now? If you're talking about the pretty world thing, you can go to our global infrastructure page. I'll put that in the chat. And have the world view out there. You know, I tell you, the expensive part of running a worldwide cloud is the data links. It's amazing what you've got to do to get all of these pipelines going across. I'm just missing that connection to the USA. So, some recent questions. I do a search for questions where I say, show me anything that is tagged with Amazon or AWS, and where there hasn't been an answer that has been accepted. So that's how I get my questions. I then tell it to sort by the newest question. We can sort by votes and all that. And so I just tend to, a few times a day, call up the list and have a look at what things are coming up. I look at the titles to see which questions are worth answering. And that's a good hint. If you're going to put a question on Stack Overflow, put a good title in there. Also, you might notice a few of these red things. I have a Grease Monkey or Tamper Monkey script running where I highlight some tags that are not too good. Here, for example, you'll see some people have tagged their questions with Lambda. And the instructions for the Lambda tag says, don't use this for AWS. And, hello, the raiding party from Anthony Writes Code. What did Anthony teach you today? Yo, raid. Greetings, everyone. What did Anthony teach you? What did he teach you today? Have to pay a visit to Anthony sometime. He taught us Python using SQS. Fantastic. We'll try and throw some SQS in there today. And I love Python, so I'll happily answer some Python for you. Actually, this month I've been involved in helping a national computer science school in Australia. And what they do is they have a challenge for school-age kids in schools all around Australia where they teach them programming. And they do Python, and they also do Blockly, which is that sort of Scratch language where you drag blocks in and out. But this is a great opportunity for kids to jump in and learn Python, as opposed to my son, who is at university, and they're teaching him C, and C is not a great starting programming language. So yay for Python. Terraform today. Wow. So as far as I understand, I've never done Terraform. Terraform's a layer on top of a CloudFormation layer, so you can deploy to multiple clouds. So I see quite a few questions coming up in Stack Overflow about it. Anyway, I was saying that sometimes, Lambda in Python. Sometimes questions come up with an incorrect tag. So I have a little automatic script that comes in here and will automatically replace that tag. So if I just refresh my screen, you'll see it's disappeared, and it puts in the standard AWS tag if possible. It's equivalent to CFM CloudFormation, but more generic. Yeah. And excellent. Let's have a look what this person's asking. Custom log file in Lambda with Python. This looks like more of a Python question than AWS. Oh, they've tagged it with Lambda. Okay. I have some requirements for which I need my Lambda functions to generate a text file with logs in JSON format and upload it to S3. From S3, we have a spectrum table, which is Amazon Redshift Spectrum, which is similar to Amazon Athena. It can query, you can run SQL directly against files in S3. We have a spectrum table which run later processes on. I know there might be different ways of doing this using CloudWatch, but we have to stick to this because of the later processes we run on the logs. Problem is I got the code working fine on my machine. When I test the function, it works only the first time. After some troubleshooting, here is a way to replicate it. So all of those folks who are great with Python, follow along with this particular question, see if you can find out what's happening. Typically, we don't like it when people put lots of code in a Stack Overflow question because Stack Overflow is not a place for people to debug your programs, but if you can narrow down the problem, it helps. If you run this several times, you will notice that the last print statement returns true the first time, and then it's always false. If I run it again in, say, an hour, same thing, first true and always false. So the Lambda handler calls log start and then prints is file log name. Mr. Bob, Terraform can create CloudFormation stacks. The usual way to use Terraform is to create the resource directly. So it's a replacement of CloudFormation. And can Terraform deploy to multiple clouds from one Terraform sort of stack? Can you deploy something in multiple cloud providers? Hey, Bannock, welcome to the show. Mr. Bob joining us from this phone on the couch. Can't even make it to your laptop. Okay, so what's this thing doing? It is saying is file. What is file? Oh, is file is something on OS path. Python is file. I don't know why I'm debugging Python on a show dedicated to AWS, but I do enjoy my Python activities. Is file returns true if path is an existing regular file. Okay, so he's saying normally it is a file and then it's false. So it sounds like it isn't creating log name. Log name is returned from log start. Log start returns log name. And log name equals something there. So is he creating a bad log name out of it? And log name consists of log prefix, which is passed in, and log ID, which is generated from now. And log prefix is log prefix. So it's saying /temp log prefix.txt. So I wonder if this is a problem caused by temporary space being stored in Lambda. We had a question on CQ yesterday where something was going on with the Lambda function, and that was inspired by questions like this, where you store things in the temp directory on Lambda, which only has 512 megs of storage, and unless you clean up afterwards, it can cause some problems. So they are doing lots of logging. What are they doing in here? Get logger, log, set level, formatter. So one thing I will do is I will say, make this a little bit, it might be to that. I have no idea how they're using it, but that might give them a bit of a hint. So what I did there is I put a comment on there. So officially an answer is when you're saying, here is an answer to your question, whereas a comment is just a little way of saying, look, this might involve a bit of back and forth. You're not meant to ask further questions within an answer. So putting on a comment is a way of saying, hey, this might help you out for a particular situation. Move myself over a little bit. Stick my head on top of more things. What are we going here in chat? We're all learning. Fantastic, Swiss Alpines. I tell you, I've learned so much from Stack Overflow. It's a great place to learn lots of things. They often say the best way to learn something is to teach it. So answering a question is a bit like providing explanations. I only went in this question because it had a bad tag of Amazon. If I refresh my screen, you'll see it's automatically changed to Amazon Web Services. DNS cache, DNS cache not refreshed. I don't know about that. Is this the one I've been commenting on so far? Yes. So this dear person is connecting from Heroku. Have any of you got Heroku experience? We've got an application on Heroku. They're using QuotaGuard to generate a static IP for my application and whitelisted 2 static IP addresses generated by the above mentioned add-on in my Redshift cluster. So they've got Heroku talking to Redshift. But still, I'm not able to connect to the Redshift database from Heroku. I've one hypothesis. It's because PsychoPG2, which is a Python Postgres library, so you can connect into a Postgres database, actually takes the default static IP address instead of one of the ones generated by QuotaGuard. Can anyone explain what's happening? And I sent a message an hour ago saying, try opening the security groups, because your Redshift cluster has a security group that controls where you can get inbound connections from. I think Redshift runs on 5439. And here's the new information. He said, I tried on 0000 and it worked. So it looks like the problem lies with the security group. The fact that if he opens it up totally, and so it should be non-gender specific. If they open up the security group totally, it works. And then I recommended, and this was an interesting thing, Redshift keeps a connection log. And in this connection log, there should be an IP address, the IP address of the remote host. So if Heroku is connecting to Redshift, he should have a trace of which IP address it used, so they can add it to the whitelist. And unfortunately, they said it just shows localhost. And my final comeback was, you can try it. This is a really neat address to go to. Try go to that address on your machine. It is a service from Akamai that simply prints your IP address. And it's a great way to find your IP address. I use it to open security groups. So I have an EC2 instance that I try to connect to, and I want to add, I have this little script. And what this script does is it goes off and gets my current IP address, stores it in a variable, and then calls authorized security group ingress on my particular security group on port 22 and 3389 for SSH and RDP, and says from that particular IP address, use my profile. So when I run that, it'll probably give an error here because it's already got those IP addresses. But when I run it, it will add my current IP address to a security group so that I can access it from where I am. So it's a good way of locking down, but easily opening things up. There's also ipecho.net. ipecho. Need a robust API to geo-allocate IPs and fetch other crucial info? ipinfo.io. Okay. And if I go to plain, that's a good one. Okay, thank you very much. I shall add that to my bookmarking list. If you are ever looking for a bookmarking service, I highly recommend Pinboard. And show you what it looks like when you're not logged in. So Pinboard is a social bookmarking site for introverts. $22 a year. It used to be $12 a year. Must be COVID related. And really good. I can just go in. I've got a browser extension where I can just go to any page and say, hey, please add this site to my bookmark list. And later on when I come in, I can go in here and look at all my bookmarked things. And I think you can even see my bookmarks. Never tried this before. If I'm not logged in, yes, you can see my particular bookmarks. This will be embarrassing, but I'll give you a link to them. So whenever I see something useful, I add it to my thing, and then I can come in and say, I want to see something related to AWS. And it just shows me all of the bookmarks related to AWS. I can also add private bookmarks, so services that I don't want other people knowing that I bookmarked, or internal services. And let's have a look at this other one. ipinfo.io, the trusted source for IP address data. Ooh, look at this. it's coming back and it's saying that I am indeed in Sydney, Australia. It's coming from Amazon. Boy, the things they know. It's a business. My address. Oh, okay. This is an address in Seattle, so it might be where it is registered for the domain name, but it has geo-detected that I am indeed coming from Australia. And what did you put there? You put Jason. Oops. If I can type, I'll get this. Jason. Okay. Coming back with that, which is great. I will bookmark that. And another one worth seeing is GeoMind. So if you ever wonder how they get this how do they map an IP address to a location in the world? And from my research, I understand that it comes from companies like GeoMind. Except not coming up. The internet is slow in Australia. GeoMind. Let's go via Google. I don't want LinkedIn. No. Smarter mental health? No. Mind. Am I getting the wrong name? MaxMind. So MaxMind are the ones who collect IP data from around the world. So they've got all these services where they can tell you where particular IP addresses are located. And from what I understand, you might have noticed when you walk around with a mobile phone, you have the ability to scan for Wi-Fi networks. And it also has your geolocation in terms of latitude, longitude. And I understand they work with providers of mobile phones to map the SSID or the IP address range of public IP addresses that it can detect with the lat long that's out there and marry them together. And that's how they sort of get the location of all these IP addresses. Of course, you could take a device with a certain IP address, put it somewhere else in the world, and it will be wrong. But that's generally how it works. MaxMind Geo Lookup. Go for a demo. Enter up to 25 IP addresses. I just want me. Just want me. What is my IP address? Cool. You'll come up with very much similar information because I think MaxMind is often the source of this type of thing. Oh, look at that. See, it's got the lat long locations. And if I copy those lat long locations into Google Maps, it puts me in the water. Okay, so it's not guaranteed accurate. I am actually located in Sydney down here where it says work. So not too bad, but a little waterlogged if that was happening. So here is Sydney, the lovely city of Sydney. Let me go into 3D mode here. 3D mode, whee! Zoom into Sydney. We've got the famous Sydney Opera House down here. Little look there. And the Sydney Harbour Bridge, where you can actually walk on top and get a nice view of the Opera House and various things. Opera House temporarily closed. Terribly sorry about that. Hope there aren't any sharks in there. The sharks tend not to come into the harbour itself, but it's quite nice. And a brief history of Australia. If I get this back the right way, when Captain Cook came in, he looked for somewhere to settle and he found this nice little harbour and came in. Actually, they first hit ground around about here, then they came into Sydney Harbour, and it's a nice little waterway that winds its way through the suburbs of Sydney and takes you to Homebush, where the 2000 Olympics were held. So that was our claim to fame. Sydney 2000 was the event, and the postcode for Sydney is 2000, so that was quite fun. Went up to Sydney Eye Tower. Let's have a look at that. It's in the city here. Thank you very much. Siri is answering me because I'm talking about Siri. You can see a big tower sticking up here, and you can go there, and they've even got an outside walk where you can sort of walk along the edge and Somebody did jump off there one time, so they closed for a bit, but please don't do that. Thank you, Siri. You can turn yourself off. Okay, we were doing something here. We're answering IP addresses. So yes, that's little they know they'll be landing on an island full of drop bears. Oh dear, we've got to explain drop bears now. So drop bears are a fictitious creature that we talk about in... Oh boy, a fictitious creature that we always pretend exists, and we scare tourists out of Australia and say leave our country alone by telling them that drop bears will come and attack them. Stories about drop bears are generally used as an in-joke to frighten and confuse outsiders while amusing locals, similar to the jackalope and other North American critters. What's a jackalope? Tales are accompanied by advice that the hero adopts various tactics to purport to deter drop bears. Placing forks in your hair, having Vegemite or toothpaste spread behind the ears or armpits, or speaking in an Australian accent scares them away. So there, that's... yes, that is a koala with Dracula fangs inserted. So koalas just sleep most of the time. It's because koalas eat eucalyptus leaves and it takes them a long time to digest them, and so they spend most of the time sitting in a tree digesting, just like my teenage children. Okay, the fake like the kangaroo does exist. There was a kangaroo recently that was found in Sydney, and there was footage of a police car escorting it across the harbour bridge. So here is our major traffic link, the Sydney Harbour Bridge going across the middle of Sydney, and the police are escorting it out of the way. So they do exist. How do you arrest? It looks like a wallaby rather than a kangaroo, actually. Wallabies are, yeah, it says wallaby. They're much smaller creatures. He gave them the slip. Rocky Balboa? Yeah, I guess they might look a little that way. Now, was this the kangaroo that jumped in the Sydney Harbour? There was a kangaroo that they were trying to catch at one stage, and it swam away from people. So let's jump ahead here. What happened? Took him to the zoo. Fantastic. Okay, back to work. For me, it's work. For you, it's just entertainment. Entertainment. How to connect EMR in a VPC to a Redshift instance in Ec2 Classic. I love this just for the title. Can you explain to your friends what this title means? I want to connect EMR in a VPC to a subnet to a Redshift We have a Redshift cluster not in a VPC. I've been trying to connect to it from an EMR, Elastic Mapreduce cluster, in a VPC. With no luck. I'd like to know if there's a way of doing that. I've tried launching a new cluster in VPC and was able to connect to it from EMR. Yeah, so a VPC, Ec2 Classic is from the old days, even before I've been with Amazon 7 years and I never really dealt with Classic. I might be able to show you a little bit about it. So in the old days of Ec2, you launched your Ec2 instance and it just lived in a mess of everything, and you couldn't create your own networks. And I don't know if you can see it anymore. In my US East region, I have the ability to use Ec2 Classic, but I think they've removed it from the console. I'll explain what EMR is in a moment too. Somewhere in here, there used to be the ability to show, here it is, supported platforms. EC2 and VPC. So VPC is what we know and love. Create your own virtual network, public subnets, private subnets, etc. EC2 means Ec2 Classic. And I don't know if I can even use it. Let's give it a go. Launch an instance, blah, 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 default, network. Launch into Ec2 Classic, which is dimmed for me. So I can't even, maybe the AMI is not good enough for it. Maybe I've got to choose an old instance type. No idea. But yeah, Ec2 Classic. And it was basically, I like to think of it like a soup. All Ec2 instances were just mixed in this network. You all had public IP addresses, I think. and there was no security around it. So sometime back they came up with VPC, they moved everything into it. The amazing thing is Redshift is only about 7.5 years old. Came out around the time I joined AWS, and so they must have launched in Classic from way back then. So EMR is Elastic Mapreduce. Now, if you ever do big data, Mapreduce is the concept behind Hadoop. And the whole idea is that you spread your work out over many machines, they each do a little bit of work, and they send it back to the main machine. And that's called Mapreduce. And so AWS launched this service called Amazon Elastic Mapreduce. Then over time, Hadoop stopped being that popular, and newer services like Spark and Presto is what powers Athena, have become much more popular. And it's almost embarrassing now to say that you use Mapreduce because it's much better to use things like Spark and Presto. So they, remember Kentucky Fried Chicken? Remember how Kentucky Fried Chicken used to be called Kentucky Fried Chicken? And when fried food became no longer good, they renamed themselves to KFC. And EMR is exactly the same way. When Mapreduce was no longer popular, they renamed themselves to Amazon EMR to hide the fact. Don't look behind the curtain. Though I understand that KFC is now going back to the Kentucky Fried Chicken name, at least in Australia. KFC name, Australia, back. KFC is getting the chop in Australia. According to reports, it will be known as Kentucky Fried Chicken again. Its original brand before 1991. So, nice comeback. You didn't know that Kentucky was renamed? You always knew them as KFC, did you? Yeah. So same thing with EMR. Great way to launch lots of machines, spread out the work, do all the work, and bring it back in. It's what really founded Google. There's a really famous paper, I don't know if I can find it, called the Google file system. And this was the precursor to a lot of the big data handling things. And the Google FS was the way that Google, maybe still today, but it's the way that they originally scanned the internet, grabbed lots of information and wrote it. So if you think when you're crawling the internet, you need to collect lots and lots of data and store it. You're not going to edit those files. You just want to store lots and lots of data and make it as efficient as possible to store this information and then process that information. And so they came up with this concept that you have a master machine. It then has slave machines that do various chunking, and underneath them they have chunks of files. And files are replicated between machines. So each chunk of a file is replicated. So if one server dies, that's all right. You can recover it from another server. But it also means that each server can process the files in parallel because they have their own copies. And this design that Google came up with back in... when did it come out? Google Colossus 2010? No, 2010 is too recent. 2019. Well, maybe it is only 10 years old. Quite amazing. But that was the precursor that really helped Google scan the internet and led to Hadoop, which is effectively an open source version of the Google file system. I don't know how to do that for Ec2 Classic, so I'm not going to answer that question. Woohoo! Let's do something different for a moment. I have an announcement here. 2010 was the last version released, was it? Oh, okay. So probably invented somewhat before it. Some of you may have seen this announcement. We have something called the AWS Community Builders Program. We also have something called AWS Community Heroes. I'll start with that one. So AWS Community Heroes are people who have contributed to the community of AWS in some way. And it's our way of saying thank you very much for doing so. Do we have any people in Saudi Arabia? No. Middle East. How about Middle East? We have people in lots of European cities. This is your chance for Saudi Arabia to get in. Thanks, Real Nginx. GFS is from 2003. That's about right. So 2003, when they started doing the Google file system. So we have heroes around the world. If I just pick somebody at random, let's go for some gender diversity. Too many white dudes. Here we are. Fantastic. Lagos, Nigeria. Fantastic. Hero quite recently. From his humble beginnings as a software developer, he started building desktop and web apps using PHP and VB. And how has he contributed here? He's been speaking at the Nigerian meetup, the only Nigerian representative at the Loft in Johannesburg, co-founder of DevOps Nigeria. Fantastic. YouTube videos and all that. So it's our way of saying thank you very much for contributing to the community. We give them things like tickets to reInvent, which you won't need for this year, and access to advanced information about AWS. So that's the Community Heroes program. The problem is, to become a community hero, there's only so many that can be had, and it has to go through a large vetting process. So to expand the program out, we have added this thing called the Community Builders Program. So it has a lower bar and more people can come into it. And let's have a look here. How can they get more involved in community activities? And members will receive access to product teams and information about new services, mentorship from subject matter experts. Excellent. And promotional credits to help support their community-based work. So if you're working for non-profits or user groups, we can help you out there. Any individual who's passionate about building on AWS can apply to join the Community Builders Program. The process is open to builders worldwide. We seek applicants from all regions, demographics, and underrepresented communities. Fantastic. So if you have been active on Stack Overflow, I highly suggest that you apply for that and try to become an AWS community builder. reInvent this year is not quite happening. Here's my reInvent page. So we had to bite the bullet and say, sorry, reInvent won't quite work this year. But it is going to be a 3-week virtual conference. Yay, 3 weeks. Now, hopefully they won't do 3 weeks continuous. My expectation is they'll probably do drip feed of keynotes, and we'll have a whole lot of online sessions to have a look at, and maybe some live things to go across with it. So stay tuned for what will be happening there. But the good news is it will be free. And so you can participate in reInvent online. So last year we had 50 to 60,000 people in Las Vegas. Now it can be open to even more people out there. Like Steve, a bandito, says, so I just need to gamble, drink, and pretend I'm in Vegas from my living room. I was actually once in Las Vegas at a reInvent event, I think, and I was standing at one of the gambling tables, and they have TV screens on top showing sports and all that. And they actually had a screen showing the World Series of Poker, which was currently on down the road in the Penn and Teller Theatre in the Rio All Suites Hotel and Casino. And but the broadcast was apparently half an hour delayed, so that people couldn't cheat by seeing how people were playing poker. But I was in Vegas when World Series of Poker was on, and I guess I could have gone there and watched it a bit. So I turned on Twitch the other day, and one of the first things on the screen was somebody playing poker, very popular. So yes, I should put a link to the community. Where did my community link go? I'll do it here. I'll put this in the chat and encourage you to sign up for the Community Builders Program if you can come up with a good excuse to do so. I can always tell that questions that have one line of question are going to be shut down. This person was asking, do you have to take at least one AWS Cert exam before the AWS Machine Learning Specialization exam? Time to show off, folks. Who has the most certification exams out there? Anyone out there with 5 or more exams? Let me know in chat. Be proud. Let's have a look at how these exam things work. Certification. 0! We have a current leader. Patsky is leading with 0. Can anyone else beat 0? So they're talking about this specialty machine learning exam out the side here. So no, you do not need, it used to be that you had to have an associate level exam before you could do the professional or a specialty, but they then appreciated that some of these specialty exams are not quite related to a traditional associate exam, so you can now go and directly go for the specialty exams. Things like machine learning don't need a lot of the AWS experience in there. Steve, you've got 2, but meaning to get more. Sorry, you were beaten out there, Patska. No excuse not to do certification exams. If you're watching here, you're into AWS, get that exam, especially the Cloud Practitioner exam. Really easy to get that one done. So if you know how to spell S3, you can do it. I was in AWS Summit Tel Aviv a few years back, and there were presentations going on. The presentations were in Hebrew, and the number 3 in Hebrew is shalosh. And so they'd be talking Hebrew. I have no idea what they're saying, blah, blah, blah. And they'd say S shalosh, blah, 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 S shalosh, blah, blah, blah. So that's a bit of the language I could pick up in there. So if you can spell S3, then you can probably do the Cloud Practitioner exam. Let's go to some questions that I prepared earlier as bookmarks and see if there's things worth talking about here. This one's a bit weird. I read this on the train coming in today. This person is basically saying that they have a load balancer that they're using for, I'll put a link for this in chat actually in case somebody can help out. They've got a load balancer they're using for HTTPS termination. So they've got their web servers in EU Central 1, which is Ireland. No, Central is Frankfurt. Central? Frankfurt, Ireland. Which region is it? EU Central 1. And they seem to go okay. Then they've stuck a load balancer in front purely to do SSL termination, and they're claiming that it's slowing down to about 400 milliseconds. And if they go directly, it only takes about 130 milliseconds to get through. And they're trying to figure out, is the application load balancer correct? Is the configuration to blame for being slow? Should they, this is interesting, should they move the load balancer to US East, where the clients will be calling from, and leave the EC2 instance in EU Central 1? EU Central 1. EU Central 1 is Frankfurt. And their instance is not running slow. Thanks, Steve. So I'm a little confused here. A load balancer would slow down the traffic a little bit because it's an extra hop that things have to go through. If it's only sending traffic to one EC2 instance, then it doesn't take too long to figure out how to do it. Yes, HTTPS termination adds a bit of load. But I'm more concerned about the fact that their users are going from the US East Coast and connecting into Frankfurt. It'd be a map of, let's say, Herndon to Frankfurt. So it's a fair bit of world distance if you try to go from Herndon to Frankfurt. So that's a bit of latency that would be caused across there. So if anything, I would imagine that it would be slow for all traffic, not just. One time I flew from New York. This was quite fun. I flew from New York to Hong Kong. And if you look at New York to Hong Kong, it shows it there, but that's not the best thing. The best way to go is if you line up the two at the top of the world. It almost works. Actually flew across here and over the North Pole. And I got a picture of the TV screen in the airplane showing we were, well, over the Arctic, not quite over the North Pole. So that was quite a fun flight to go across there. I was dead for the next few days with that time zone shift, I tell you. Yeah, I don't know why a load balancer would slow down this much time, but if your users, if you are all in US, wonder where the Amazon server. Are you in Herndon area, Pescatariat? Herndon is a very popular area for IT companies in North Virginia. So when you see our North Virginia thing, this Herndon area is the IT area of Washington, DC, effectively. So Washington's down there, Herndon is nearby, and that's where all the big IT companies tend to go. Fairfax, Virginia. Where's Fairfax? Fairfax. Oops, Fairfax, Virginia. Yeah, it's all that same sort of area. And the other tip I would give you is if you are ever heading to Washington, D.C. to see the Smithsonian's, which are probably closed at the moment, in Dulles Airport, which is a very 70s type thing, there is this fantastic thing called the, I won't say that name, the Udvar Hazy Center, which is an extension of the Smithsonian Institution. And they have a fantastic exhibit of aircraft, including these stealth airplanes you might remember back from the 70s or whatever that fly around. And they also have a space shuttle sitting there, so you can go up and almost touch a space shuttle. There's another one of them in Florida, of course. And they've got a reproduced Wright Brothers aeroplane, so you can see how all that worked. So really amazing center that I would highly recommend if they are open these days. What does it say? Yeah, it's open. So go visit there whenever you're there. Put this on your bucket list. Another thing to put on your bucket list is Longreach, Queensland. So if you are into aircraft, there is the Qantas Founders Museum. Qantas is the airline of Australia. It stands for Queensland and Northern Territory Airway Service, something like that. And their park for aircraft are out here. Looks like many airports these days with lots of aircraft parked somewhere, doesn't it? So here you can go, and it's a bit of a museum for Qantas type things. The irony is that Longreach is located in the middle of nowhere in Australia. We all sort of live along the coast, so to get there, you really have to intentionally get there. And when a Qantas aircraft, the 747-400 or something, it was a long-range aircraft that Qantas introduced, and they had a naming competition to name the aircraft. And the name that came out was the Longreach, because this museum is in this area called Longreach, and the aircraft could long reach a long way to fly overseas. So quite neat. The latest trips before COVID, they had flights running from Perth direct to London, which was one of the world's longest airline flights that were going out there. And they've had to pause them a little bit. Okay, we're talking about AWS. SQS, for all of you folks who joined us with the raiding party. Here's an SQS question for you. I was confused by this. Let's have a look. I have a listener which polls messages from SQS. There's a condition where the listener processes the message, and if the condition is not met, then we should place the message back to the queue. And it should be available to any other component or same listener after 20 seconds. I'm not sure how to achieve the later one. Place the message back to the queue, and it should be visible after 20 seconds to other listeners. I saw a post, but placed it back in the queue. It will be immediately available to others. So I sometimes see messages like this, where people want to selectively pull messages from a queue and for whatever reason put them back in the queue. And this is because SQS does not have the ability to say, only give me messages of type A or type B. Basically, you just say, give me some messages, and it gives you something off the queue. This is generally not a good idea of trying to pull something off the queue and then put it back on, because whichever process pulled it off might get the message again the next time. Messages will reappear on the queue if it is not correctly processed. You could intentionally not process a message and have it appear back on the queue, but it's not a good idea to put things back on the queue. Visibility timeout solved. So yeah, so the normal process is a message is on a queue. A worker comes along and says, give me a message, or up to 10 messages. The message is made invisible so that other processes won't pull it off, but it is not deleted, because if the worker that is processing the message fails in some way, then SQS will, after a certain invisibility timeout, it will make the message reappear back on the queue. If a worker does successfully process a message, it is meant to call back to SQS and say, please delete the message. So you have this thing called the visibility timeout. It's a default for the queue, up to 12 hours. But when you retrieve a message from SQS, you can also say how long to make it invisible. And there is an API call where you can give it a heartbeat and you can say, SQS, I'm still working on this message, don't delete it. So you can go back every few minutes and say, don't delete, don't delete. So if this person wants to have a message reappear, they could simply, not delete it and it will automatically reappear back on the queue, but it's not generally a good idea to send things back to a queue. Somebody here is saying, if they use deletion policy, never would delete the messages. You can manually delete them by having an acknowledgement. Okay, the acknowledgement you delete by. So when you retrieve a message, you get a thing called a receipt handle. And when you delete the message, you use that receipt handle. Here's the interesting thing. If one worker retrieves a message from SQS and they get a receipt handle, and that worker does not successfully process it, so it goes invisible again, and another worker pulls it off, they get a different receipt handle because the first worker might just be very slow. And it's possible that the first worker will then complete its task and call back and say, delete the message. It will pass it back with the original receipt handle, message handle, receipt handle, and SQS can tell the difference between which worker actually sent back that message. So I don't know what they're trying to do here. Yeah. Almost exciting about having SQS questions. Encryption. This one I just want to point out, the heading is quite bad. So encryption max data size allowed for AWS KMS is 4K. So a couple of weeks ago we were talking about KMS. So KMS, when it encrypts things, KMS itself does not encrypt your data. Rather, KMS creates a random encryption key. That encryption key is then used to encrypt your data, and then KMS will encrypt the encryption key, which is always under 4K, and you can store that encrypted encryption key with your data. When you want to decrypt it, KMS will decrypt the encrypted encryption key, use that unencrypted encryption key to decrypt your data, and everything is okay. So KMS itself does not do it. And it's also known as envelope encryption that I think somebody mentioned here. Yes. Is done with envelope encryption. But the one thing I want to point out on this message, encryption in AWS services is not a good heading. So I will change that. Does AWS KMS encryption use it? So every question on Stack Overflow has to have a unique heading. And the heading they had was a bit too generic. So hopefully that is a better heading for people to find that question later on. Lots of recursion, my mind is blown. So the fun thing with the KMS keys, if you talk about recursion, is the whole concept that you have a data key, which is encrypted by a KMS key, which is encrypted by a master key. And sometimes you have all of these pretty pictures. Yes, thank you very much. I do not want to subscribe to your wonderful publication. So here you've got a master key within KMS. KMS never ever gives out its keys. You can import into KMS, you can't export from KMS. It then has account master keys that are customer managed. You can then have keys based on like S3 or EBS and all that. And then within those services, it can create data keys. So the data key for this file is encrypted with the S3 key, which is encrypted by the account key, which is encrypted by AWS. So it's this whole hierarchy of keys. There was a recent problem with, there was an African nation had SIM card keys. There was a problem where exposed. I think it's more recent than this. This is a 5-year-old article. There was a recent article where, was it Nigeria or somewhere? And And in your SIM card, basically a SIM card authenticates your phone to the provider of the telephone network. So the telephone network exchanges some information with your phone, validates who you are, and they know how to bill you, and then they let you onto the telephone network. And there was wish I could find it, SIM hijacking ring. That was not for that. Anyway, Nigeria or somewhere, somebody stole the master key for the SIMs, and that meant they could create their own SIM cards which can get unlimited calls on their particular network, and they're having to reissue. Or was it maybe not SIM cards? Maybe it was credit cards. Credit card master keys exposed, and they have to retrieve. Here it is. Yes, South African banks replace 12 million cards. Have to replace 12 million cards after employees printed and then stole its master key. So the very master key that is used to encrypt all the other keys that goes with the chips on credit cards. So the master key was stolen because they printed it out and took it out. It's a 36-digit code key that you wouldn't be able to guess. And they've made thousands of fraudulent transactions going out. So security is very, very important. You've got to keep your master keys secure. And that's why in our KMS service, the master key can never be exported from the service. Otherwise, things like this can happen. And just the cost, imagine the cost of reissuing millions of cards. That's going to totally blow the budget for that bank. It's amazing that credit cards still exist today. Credit cards are inherently insecure. The fact you can just read a number over the phone to somebody. I'm all in favor of chip and pin. In Australia, everything's gone chip and pin now. So if you're in a restaurant, they will bring a mobile device to your table. You wave your card over it, enter in a pin if necessary. We don't do signing of anything anymore. Things like Apple Pay and NFC has made credit card transactions much more secure. So hopefully credit card fraud will drop down a bit. Same thing in Canada. Yeah, no signing. A lot of European countries are going that way. Was it Norway? There are some countries out there that use, here it is. Norway is the first country to go cashless. And it's very hard if you want to try and purchase a transaction in Norway to be able to use cash out there. It's a little hard because not all people in society have a card necessarily, so it can be bad for members of society who can't open a bank account and get going. So hopefully they have ways of issuing cards that people can use. Hong Kong is excellent. They have something called an octopus card. And if you hop off the airplane, you hop on their train, you can get this octopus card, and it can be used to go on public transport, but it's also stored value. So you can go to a shop and buy a sandwich, and you can use the octopus card for stored value. Hong Kong Airport train. And I love Hong Kong Airport in that you get off the plane and you walk straight into the train station. The train is just there. Might be a while before people go back to Hong Kong, given current activities. Cashless contact payments of the future. Yeah. Make S3 public. Let's see what we're doing here. I'm logged in AWS with admin privilege. I'm trying to make a bucket public read and write. I've deselected these options, so it looks like they've turned off block public access, which allows them to create bucket policies. I also followed this one. Okay, it looks like they've linked to a question with a bucket policy that allows things to be public. Okay. And tried to update the bucket policy, getting error access denied. And 46 minutes ago, somebody jumped in. Thank you, Jeremias Morales, who is calling in from Brazil. Fantastic. Thank you. The link is working fine. Along with bucket access, you should paste the following in the bucket policy. So he's recommending a put and a get with a slash. It should only be the bucket name here, not the bucket ARN. But not knowing what this person did, it's hard to say what else they've done. So I'll just give an upvote because the answer is useful to that person. And as a result, Jeremias will hopefully get excited because his reputation, if I refresh this page, has gone from 21 to 31. So 50% improvement. I'm pleased to have been able to do that. Stack Overflow is run on the long tail. It's lots of people like yourself answering questions occasionally. Thank you very much. What else do I have as a distraction here for us? Why did I mark this thing in Cloud Guru? Oh, that's right. I want to spend some time today looking at S3 bucket replication. So let's take a bit of a break from answering questions. And somebody actually asked me the other day, can you daisy chain S3 bucket replication? So can you go from bucket A to bucket B to bucket C? What do you think? Let me know in chat if you think that is indeed possible. And I wasn't too sure, so I thought, let's have a bit of a play. Steve thinks no. I heard no as well, but let's confirm some of these things. So let's create a bucket. Bandito1. I can spell Bandito, yes. And I will create that in Sydney because I'm in Sydney. I will turn on versioning because if you are going to be using S3 bucket replication, you need versioning to be turned on. And do I need anything else turned on in here? I don't care about public access. That looks pretty good. So I have my Bandito1 bucket. I will now create a Bandito2 bucket also in Sydney. I will try the new same region replication. It's not really new, but never really used it before. So I've created my 2 stack Bandito buckets. I now want to replicate from 1 to 2. Brads is saying yes to make it interesting. AWS is pretty flexible. Let's figure it out. How do I do this? I probably go to properties and where is replication? Shows you how much I've done this lately. Management. Replication. I should just point out one of my favorite services I keep answering in Stack Overflow is S3 Inventory. S3 Inventory can provide a daily or weekly CSV file, which contains a listing of all your objects in S3. So this is really good. Instead of, if you've got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, millions of files in S3, instead of trying to list them, which only happens 1,000 at a time, you can ask for an inventory report. There's a small charge attached. We dump a CSV file for you, and you can then use that CSV file to manage the contents of your S3 bucket. So I'm not sure if it has metadata, but it has file size, name, etc. Very useful service. Let's go to replication. You can use cross-region replication to give copying objects across regions. This is really popular because a lot of companies come to us and say, I have a company policy that my data must be backed up and it must be in another location that is at least X distance from each other. So if I was in Australia, I'd say 100 kilometers, you might say 100 miles, whatever. And the reason for that is you don't want all your backups getting destroyed if you live in Beirut. Do you see the news? Beirut explosion. I'll go for Sydney in the Herald. My local newspaper had some very interesting pictures in here. Wow! So this explosion in Beirut took out apparently offices all around the place, and there was a map, the different articles. So you can see people's homes, things taken out. So you really don't want your data kept in multiple locations where multiple locations are close enough that some accident like this can actually happen. So cross-region replication is our way of saying, hey, we're not going to tell you where our availability zones are located. They are close enough to have low single-digit millisecond latency, but we don't officially tell you how far apart they are. But if you replicate across regions, I can guarantee you that the Sydney region is at least 100 kilometers away from any other region because there's no other region in Australia. So cross-region replication is a great way of saying replicate my data in distant places. Then customers said, I also like this facility and I want to replicate my data between buckets in the same region. So you can now do that as well. I will say replicate Bandito1, the whole bucket. Do I want to replicate with KMS? That can be dangerous based on permissions. I won't do KMS. Destination bucket will be stack Bandito2. Change the storage class. Oh, that's neat. What this is saying is if you're going to replicate to another bucket, it's probably for backup purposes. Why pay full price for storing your data instantly available? So you could change your storage class and go to something like S3 Glacier. It costs a fraction of the price to store, but it takes time and there's a cost involved in retrieving your data. But if it's just a backup, that's perfectly good. So I really like that. Change ownership to destination bucket owner. Oh, this is interesting. I answer many Stack Overflow questions where people replicate things from account A to account B. And if account A stores something in a bucket belonging to a different AWS account, they retain ownership. And the owner of the bucket, of the destination bucket, sometimes can't even delete or access that object. So whenever you copy files between buckets belonging to different accounts, always use this thing called ACL equals, I've got to find it here, Boto 3 S3. Bucket owner. Here it is, a bucket owner full control. So if you're going to issue a command such as copying an object between buckets, you can specify an access control list or ACL, and please grant it bucket owner full control if you are copying to a bucket owned by a different account, which lets the owner of that service do it. Steve, you're happy when they release same region replication. Some people are amused by small things, but it's a great service. S3 replication time control. Replicates 99% of your objects within 50 minutes. Okay, so replication does not guarantee how fast replication happens, but if you want to pay us a little bit more money, we can guarantee that 99.99% will occur within 15 minutes. So my understanding is it would normally be much faster than that, but I guess this is a way of saying, can I have it? What's the price? Time control. Sounds like a time travel service. Requests. Time control. I can't see it. Time replication. Here it is. S3 inventory costs $0.25 cents per million objects listed. So not an expensive service, folks. Feel free to use it. Storage class analysis is a service that we look at your objects and recommend which storage class would be good. So if you have an object that's accessed frequently, then you want to keep it in standard. If you have something that's hardly ever accessed, we can recommend that you move it to Glacier or something. Replication pricing. Replication time control data transfer is 1.5 cents per gig to make sure that we replicate it very quickly. And it doesn't say how long it normally takes. Replication time control. I love that. Sounds like a science fiction story. Okay, what were we doing? That's right, we are replicating things between buckets. So I'm turning on, why can't I say next? Have I not answered a question here? Oh, change object ownership. I don't want to change object ownership. Oh, I've got to give it a role apparently. I'll let it create a new role. And, oh, is that a misspelling? It says rule name. It's got role. Oh no, that's the name of the rule I'm creating. Bandito replicate. Go for it. Thank you very much. So, in theory now, I can store an object in Bandito 1. Get your stopwatches ready. And I'll upload my brain. And I have placed an object in Bandito 1. I will now replicate this tab, except I will say, show me the contents of Bandito 2. And Bandito 2 does not yet have my object. So set your stopwatches. We'll see how long it takes. Ah, there it is. So we can measure this. Last modified 11:11:12 a.m., which is the time for me in Sydney. Okay, it's copied the time that the object was created, but as you saw, it took less than a minute or so to get the objects between them. So you can pay extra to have that done. So now let's see what happens if I create Stack Bandito 3. Wahaha. Versioning must be on. create bucket. And now we go to Bandito 2 and management replication. Best way to figure out if something works in AWS is to try it. Like, it's not that hard. Next destination bucket is going to be Stack Bandito 3. I don't want time control. I'm happy with my time these days. I'll create another role because I don't know what it should be. And this is Bandito 223. What's your votes? Is it going to work? I've never seen an object not show up instantly, even without the feature disabled. With the feature disabled. What makes sense to pay extra if you replicate thousands of objects? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, if there's lots of objects being created very, very quickly, then there could be delays. And if you need the data to be in the other region, then you really want them. So I guess somebody has said, we really, really need this. And it's expensive to transfer things quickly. Maybe we have large batches and we'll give you priority if you pay a little bit more. Okay, so let's test backwards. Let's upload something to Bandito 2. So Bandito 2 should replicate to Bandito 3. I'll give it a picture of some coffee. So we're uploading coffee to Bandito 2. I then open up a tab to Bandito 3. So the first question is, will it work because of this chaining? And how long will it take? I could sit here forever. So going from 2 to 3, and if it's like the other one, it should take only a minute or so. Whee! So there is my Bandito 2, back to Bandito 3. I set up replication correctly. I probably did, it's just taking a bit of time. From 2 to 3 with a role, copy. Yeah, look good. Okay, so it copied from 2 to 3. So we've successfully tested 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Now let's go back and from Bandito 1, we will upload an object and see how far it gets. We will upload a picture of R2D2. As a trainer, I have a wonderful collection of photos that I always try and update there. So R2D2, let's have a look at him. Oh, very nice. R2D2, I finally saw the last Star Wars movie. Was I impressed by it? I can hardly remember it now. I think it was better than the one before it. Okay, so we have R2D2 in Bandito 1. I go to Bandito 2. Refresh. R2D2 has appeared in Bandito 2. I now go to 3 and it has not yet appeared, or it might not yet appear. So somebody said you just Googled it. So Bandito, you Googled the answer. What was the answer that you found online? Can you daisy chain S3 replication? Can you cross-replicate across more than 2 regions? This is coming from Cloud Guru, which does a lot of AWS online training. And they say, found this in the guide on cross-region replication. You can replicate objects from a source bucket to only one destination bucket. So that is saying that bucket A can only replicate to one other bucket. But the question is, can you replicate? You can replicate objects from a source bucket to only one destination bucket. After S3 replicates an object, the object can't be replicated again. For example, if you change the destination bucket in an existing replication configuration, S3 won't replicate object again. So, what is not replicated? Oh. What is not replicated? Thank you for the link. Yes, we have our answer there. After it replicates an object, it can't be replicated again. But the person who asked me this question also asked me why. Now, I didn't make S3, so I don't know why it is S3, but I think the answer lies in versioning. You may have recalled that I said versioning had to be turned on to allow replication. And I think this is done so that, if lots of files are suddenly created in one bucket, how does it remember which files should be replicated to the other one? And versioning allows objects to be replaced on top of each other. So effectively, every upload is a separate version of the object, and it can keep track. So it's probably doing a sync between the buckets of every version behind the scenes, but the chaining of replication probably doesn't work with versioning, because once you've replicated something to a different version, it probably can't replicate that version again. I'm not too sure. I wonder if it happened after someone created an infinite loop. That would be interesting. Though theoretically, if you replicated one way and replicated the other way, let's try it. Let's try that. I think that will actually work. So if we go into Bandito 2 and do our replication, and let's remove the 2 to 3, but let's add a replication of 2 to 1. And I think this actually works. Bandito 2 to 1. And the reason it works is replication only goes one way. So if you add a file, add an object to bucket 1, it'll go to 2, but it doesn't care what's in 2. You can have lots of other stuff in 2. It doesn't back replicate it. So you should actually be able to send things back and forth between the two. So here I am in Bandito 2. I will now upload a file. Fluffy the rabbit. So this is in Bandito 2, has Fluffy, and it should now replicate down to Bandito 1. We'll give it a moment there. And while I'm doing that, let's upload to 1, and we'll give it an elephant. So elephant is going to 2, and Fluffy is going to 1. So let's see. Number 2 has Fluffy. Number 1 has elephant. Yes, so the Fluffy has gone from 2 to 1, and the elephant should appear anytime now. There it is. So you can replicate and point to each other. It does not cause an infinite loop. So as for chaining, I'm not too sure why they didn't allow that. But there we have an answer. You cannot chain your S3 buckets in a continuous replication, but anything, it only works in one hop. So 1 will go to 2, 2 will go to 3, 3 will go to that, but anything that goes from 1 to 2 will not trigger a replication to the next bucket. Fantastic. Since you have replication on, I'll just point out you have this additional, so versioning. If versioning is on a bucket, you have this additional control where you can show the versions that go behind it. And it's always worth pointing out, if I come in here and I delete this coffee one, it appears that coffee has been deleted from this bucket. But if I go into the show option, it shows that S3 has simply placed a delete marker on top of the coffee object, which says the old version is still there, but make it look like it's been deleted. I can still go back to the old version and have a look at it. If I click the link, access denied. If I open it here, so I can still see the previous version. There it is, a nice cup of coffee, but it is marked as being deleted if you click the show thing. And if I delete the delete marker, then I go back to the version view, I can see that files come back. So a delete marker says pretend nothing is there. So all of the previous versions are retained. You are charged for all previous versions of your objects. So be aware, if you turn on versioning, there might be a cost. There is a useful utility which will clean that up. These lifecycle rules, I think they are. And the lifecycle rules can be used to clean up previous versions. So you can say, hey, take my previous versions and I would like to move them to Glacier after a certain amount of time to save money. Or you can also clean up, here it is, clean up expired object delete markers. So if an object is sort of deleted and you just have delete markers lying around, it will clean up and remove those delete markers. All nice and confusing. Delete markers don't replicate. No, delete markers do replicate. Let's try that. Bandito1, I will, oh, you're right, there was a change. There was a change. If I go and delete, what was a picture? I put my brain, let's move my brain because that came from bucket 1. If I delete my brain from number 1, if we have a look at the versions, then there is a delete marker placed on top of brain 1, which has deleted it. If I go to bucket 2 that has replication turned on, which got my brain from bucket 1, and I look at all the versions, it's still got only the original version. So this was a change a while back, I believe. S3 replicate delete marker. They used to replicate delete marker, but they stopped it a while back. Soft delete operation delete markers. Let's see. The delete marker, what should the replication be when an object is soft deleted? Two possible outcomes. Delete marker is replicated version 1 configuration. But under version 2 configuration, the delete marker is not replicated. And you can force version 1 replication by doing a certain thing with your bucket, but it's just easier to give up and say, I'm just going to use version 2 replication. And there was a way you could force version 1, but I can't quite remember how it is. So these days, yes, delete markers are not replicated. Why they chose to do that, I'm not too sure. Good point there, Wally. I've forgotten about that one. Okay. In version mode, do we get charged for each of the versions of the stored files? Yes. So if I've got my coffee picture here and I upload another object file that happens to be called coffee, in this case it will be exactly the same file, but S3 doesn't know that, then I am charged for storage for both of those versions. And S3 is charged on sort of pro rata per month. So if I have it there for the entire month, I'll be charged twice the information, twice the storage, because I'm storing twice as much information in there. It doesn't do a diff, it stores the whole object. So I could later come in here and delete the earlier version of the object, and the newer version is fully retained. It doesn't do differential, it stores the whole object in there. I could just come in and say delete a specific version of the object. Also what happens sometimes is people come in and they wonder why their bucket can't be deleted. So if I come in here and I'm in Bandito 2 and I say I want to delete this bucket. So Bandito 2, tick the box and I say please delete the bucket. The bucket is not empty. If you deleted all the object, so the S3 console deletes things. So what I could do is come in here, AWS S3 ls stack Bandito 2. So I have all these objects there and I say, oh, I don't want those objects. So I'm going to say AWS S3 RM. Can I use star here? Might be able to say recursive. So it's now deleted those objects from my bucket. And if I list it again, my bucket is empty. And now I can say AWS remove bucket. And it comes back and says, I've given something wrong. I don't give it the S3 thing. Remove bucket. I'd have to give, sorry, AWS S3 remove bucket. And it says, an error occurred. You tried to delete an empty bucket. But if I go to it and I say, hey, my bucket is empty, what's going on? The answer is, of course, that there are previous versions there. If I refresh, it shows nothing's being in there. The trick is to go to show, and you'll see that all of the objects have the delete markers on top of them. And you've got to go through and specifically delete the versions. I wonder what happens if I leave the delete markers. Will it let me delete the bucket? So here I only have delete markers. If I go and try and delete the bucket again, R6, when the files are moved to a different type of storage, that applies to all the versions or just the last one? Wow, I don't know. So it won't let me delete the bucket with the delete markers in there. So if I delete the delete markers, I probably can now finally delete the bucket. Okay, that's gone. Let's try and answer R6's question here. If I have an object here, and do I have multiple versions? I have one version. I will upload another version. I think the version, the storage standard for each object is separate. So if I now go to the hidden view and I say, please change my storage class, which unfortunately is not always immediate. We'll see what I can do here. I want to change to, let's say, standard infrequently accessed. Standard infrequently accessed is a lower cost, but you get charged if you access the object. And if you access it less than once a month, it's worthwhile. If you access it more than once a month, infrequent access is not really worthwhile. So here it says the storage class has changed to standard IA. If I show the versions, looks like, oh, this is really interesting. Not only did my previous version stay as standard, but it looks like it created another version of the object. And this is because S3 objects are immutable. You can't actually change objects. So it effectively copied the object back to itself with the different storage class, but in copying to itself, rather than overriding itself because we had versioning on, it made an additional version of the object. Unless I'm getting myself mixed up here and we really did. No, that was the one. No, I take that back. I uploaded the second. Yeah, and it made the third version. So it made an additional version of that thing. That's fascinating. I guess it will be the same when you activate versioning, says Wally, only the new ones will get the change. And I know that it's true that they can be different, because if we come back to this lifecycle management, I can say to it, hey, please transition all previous versions to Glacier after 1 day, for example. So what it can do is say, if you overwrite an object with a new version, move the previous versions to a different storage class. So yes, they can have different storage classes, and more specifically, if you look in the hidden view and you change the storage class, it only affects the most recent version. This is fascinating. Well, I've certainly learned more than I was expecting there. I'll have to clean up my buckets at some stage. Okay. Let's pick something else here. Just have a look. Have any new questions been asked here? 6 minutes ago. How to run Lambda functions before and after Amplify? No idea. How to renew a reserved instance. So reserved instances, of course, are the most confusing thing on EC2. EC2 itself is easy. Reserved instances are hard. It's a way of saying, I intend to run this particular family of EC2 instance for the next 1 or 3 years. Could you please give me a pricing discount? And not S3, I want EC2 pricing. And you can get a nice discount. So let's have a quick look before we answer the question. A reserved instance savings plans are less confusing. Yes, that's what I want to get to. And what's the difference between reserved instances and savings plans? So reserved instances are old, you can tell, because look, it's got an old logo on the video that's here. Where's the pricing? Where's the pricing? I don't want to go to the how to use it. I want to go to the actual pricing. See pricing. And the easy way to explain it is by pointing to an example. Maybe we'll look for an M5 extra large. Here we are. So an M5 extra large in whatever region I'm currently running in, I don't know which region, is 19 cents. If you buy a reserved instance on a, let's go to a 3-year term first of all, because it's the best. On a 3-year term, instead of paying 19 cents an hour, you can pay 8 cents an hour, which gives you a saving of 57%, and you don't pay us anything up front. So you effectively say to us, I promise that I will run this instance continuously for a year. If you don't run it for a year, we charge you for a year. So basically we charge you for it, and every hour of the year that you do run a matching instance, we don't bill you for the instance because you've effectively already promised to pay for it. So you get a 57% discount. If you agree to pay some of it up front, then we'll give you an even bigger saving. So you can save 62%. Less savings if you go for a 1 year, so you save in the sort of 30s and 40s. And we also have this thing called a convertible term. So a convertible is, you might have purchased an M5 reserved instance, and what do you know, we just released the M6. How do you convert it to an M6? You couldn't. So we've now introduced this thing called a convertible RI, which is less good. You save less money, but you can turn it in. So let's say 1 year into your convertible 3-year term, you decide I want to move to an M6. You cash in sort of your remaining 2 years and you use that towards a new reserved instance. So we don't give you the money back, but you can buy a new reserved instance that has to be valued at more than the remaining amount of money in your instance, and you get the new reserved instance. So convertibles are really good. Brad's asking, what's confusing about reserved instance? We looked at them and I feel like I'm missing something. So yeah, it's confusing in the terms of, is it 1 year? Is it 3 year? Is it standard? Is it convertible? Do you pay up front? Do you not pay up front? Also, there is something in reserved instances called, I have it on this page, flexibility. Flexibility. Reserved instance flexibility. And the way it works, flexibility. Let's say you get an M5 extra large, and then you decide, I really want an M5 2 extra large. Can you do it? And the answer is yes. You're effectively buying a reserve. Think for a moment, why does AWS have reserved instances? Yes, we want to give you a discount, but we give you a discount in exchange for you helping us make it more predictable of how much hardware we should buy. So if we know that 1,000 people want to have this particular instance type, we can buy the equipment necessary to provide that amount of service rather than having everything on demand. So it makes it easier for us. When we put in a host computer that runs, let's say, the M5 family, it can run any of these different M5 family sizes. So whether you're running a single 2x large or you're running 2 extra large machines, for us it takes the same amount of CPU, the same amount of RAM. So we give you this normalization factor. So if you purchase a reserved instance for a 2 extra large, you can later use it to run 2 extra larges, or if you run a 4 extra large, you'll get half the price off because you've already paid for the equivalent of the 2 extra large. So that's what I mean by reserved instances get confusing. Reserved instances also get confused about whether it's an availability zone. So you have something called a zonal reserved instance, regional and zonal reserved instances. So I mentioned before that we like to know our capacity limits ahead of time, but reserved instances are not only a discount, they're also a capacity guarantee. So let's say you are the next Netflix, you are running your services and you want to guarantee that you'll have enough machines. And if something goes wrong with one availability zone, you want to know 100% that you will get capacity in another availability zone to ramp up and get more capacity. So there is it's not a guarantee, it's a capacity assurance. And here it is. It's a capacity reservation. And if you buy a zonal reserved instance, we provide a capacity reservation in the specified availability zone. So you say, I want my M5 extra large in zone A. And we will make sure, we will give you an assurance that you can get capacity on that when you need it, and other people will come second. But it means you only get the RI if you launch things in that specific availability zone. If, on the other hand, you get a regional reserved instance, then we don't guarantee capacity. Sorry, I can't use the word guarantee. We don't assure capacity, but you can get the discount regardless of which availability zone you run your reserved instance. So that's why I find reserved instance confusing. It's 1 year, 3 years, standard, convertible, no upfront, lots of upfront, zonal, regional. And I feel sorry for people who have to learn this sort of thing. But that's why we also have savings plan, which is much easier in the world. Saving plans are a flexible model. It saves up to 72%, same maximum you can get as a reserved instance. But the real nice thing is you don't have to tell us as much. So you basically commit to us. Instead of saying, I will run an M5 extra large for the year, you say, I will spend $100 every, I think it's every hour, a certain number of dollars per hour. So you might say $10 an hour. I guarantee that I will run $10 worth of EC2 in that hour. If you don't run $10 worth, we charge you for it. But if you do run $10 worth, we give you a lower price. And if we look at the pricing, again, it's got 1 year, 3 years, no upfront, all upfront. Which region, which operating system, because we have to charge you for Windows, etc. Let's go for an M5. Where can I go for an M5 here? M5, okay. So an M5 extra large, normally 19 cents. If you buy it under a savings plan, you get a 27% discount. Let's go for a higher savings. We'll go for 3 year, and it will flick to 19 cents, comes down to 9 cents. So they were about half price, just by saying, I promise to spend a certain amount of money every hour of the year on EC2, and we give you the discount. So much easier. Hey, Drills with Kitties. Yeah, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. So yeah, savings plan is practically that simple. You just say, yeah, oh, there's a few options. There's for EC2. There's Fargate, because guess what? Behind the scenes, Fargate runs on EC2, so we're happy to pass on the similar savings. And they also added it to Lambda. So you can, if you promise to do a certain amount of Lambda, then you'll get some discounts. So maybe I say, give me a 3-year reservation on Lambda. And normally I would be charged blah, 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 and I can get some savings in there. And now there's a difference here. EC2 savings plan versus savings plans for Amazon EC2. And there is a difference. So this one, on a specific instance family, in a specific region, regardless of AZ size, etc. So let's see what this comes out to. This one gives 37% saving for a specific instance family in a specific region, whereas the other one said regardless of instance family, region, etc. So why is it better? Because I did 1 year. This one gives better. So if you're willing to say, for a specific instance family in a specific region, we give you even more off. Yeah, spending so little on Lambda. A lot of customers say that they don't get charged for Lambda, because Lambda can often fall under the free usage tier. We look at the free usage tier and put in Lambda. You get 1 million requests a month and 3.2 million seconds of compute time. It's based on how much RAM you consume and all this, so it's not really 3.2 million seconds, but a lot of companies can fit that in there. I also started drafting one time. I wonder if I can find it. Log free. Will be a markdown file. I started a little exercise one time when I wanted to calculate the value of the free tier in AWS. And you might think, oh, the free tier is wonderful. People on Stack Overflow often get scared if they're going to go over the free tier. It's like, oh, my EBS storage is going to go over the limit. My S3 is going to go over the limit. But if you look at it here, S3 gives you 5 gigs of standard storage. That's fantastic. How much does that cost? So 2 cents. So 5 gig times 0.023 is 11 cents. We give you 11 cents a month of storage on S3. 20,000 GET requests. That's fantastic. How much is a GET request? Let's see. It's a tiny fraction of a cent per 1,000 requests. So we give you 20 of them. So maybe it's 2 cents savings. And it came out that S3 gives you 13 cents of savings a month. So people get scared about going over the free tier limit. It's not going to bankrupt you. Even EC2, you look at micro instances. We give you a full month of micro instances for EC2. And if you look at the on-demand price for a T2 micro, T2 micro is about 1 cent an hour. So if you multiply that by 24 hours by 30 days in the month, okay, it's $8. It's not too bad. But they're worried that if they go over the free usage tier, it'll cost the cost of a cup of coffee. The EC2 free tier is pretty good. So it only applies to a T2 micro or T3 micro. We have a lot of old generation machines around, so we like it when people use our older generation, for example, T2 machines rather than the T3s, because we've got to do something with them. And so it gives you about $8, but you can run Windows and Linux, and the Windows are more expensive, so maybe it's $20 worth of service. So have a good play with them there. And EBS gives you 30 gig of storage, and that's 10 cents per gig, so we're effectively giving you $3 of storage from EBS. Please do not use the free tier for production systems. It's just there to play around, see how you go. How to renew a reserved instance. One of my reserved instances is about to expire in the near future. I'd like to buy the reserved instance plan for the instance. I'm not planning to run 2 such instances at the same time. I just want to extend the reserved instance. How do I do it? It feels like it might be a good fit for Stack Overflow. It's not a good fit for Stack Overflow. This is a programming Q&A site. You will be shut down and people will tell you to go away. I've never renewed a reserved instance, but I know that you can contact our customer service people who are separate to support. Customer service just take care of reserved instance and billing questions, and they can handle it. I don't know if you renew or you actually just buy a new reserved instance, which has a start date that's there. There is actually a whole user guide for reserved instances because it's so confusing. Reserved instance lease expiring. How do we renew a reserved instance? Well, this is pretty good. You can queue your reserved instance purchases for a specific date and time in the future. To renew your RI, you can queue it for that date and time the existing one expires. Well, that's going to be a better answer, isn't it? From, and I have a nice little utility here that just copies a link to a page in Markdown format. From this page, it says that thing. Before renewing, you should also consider saving the plans. Where's a good link for that? That looks good. Whether it's zonal or regional. That should confuse them quite mightily in that thing. You can also sell reserved instances. If you have a reserved instance you don't want, there is a thing called the Reserved Instance Marketplace. But since convertible RIs are introduced in our savings plan, I don't know if that many people want reserved instances. They might just go totally for savings plans. EBS is included. EBS can be a higher cost than EC2. Let's see, EBS, yeah, if you've got large disk volumes and that you pay for that even when the instance is turned off, EBS could be a higher cost, you're quite right. Kitty says, I tried Nano DevBox and it was a little laggy. Microsuited fine. So the one thing I will warn, if you do want to use smaller instances for your activities, for example, T3, you've got these nano instances, which are dirt cheap. EC2 pricing, EC2 on-demand pricing. A nano instance is only half a cent per hour. So that's like $4 a month. So are really good. They're a bit low on memory, so don't try and run Windows on them. But the one thing I will warn you is that the network performance is pretty poor on some of these smaller things. So if you're downloading lots of content, it can be pretty lousy. I was using Workspaces recently, and Workspaces is our Windows remote desktop type thing, and the internet connectivity is amazing. I was downloading things to install, and it flies, but be careful of nano and micro instances, how fast they travel. Any interesting things? SQS sensor in Airflow not triggering when there's a new message. Oh, I thought there was going to be an IoT question there. Custom log files, looks like we've done them. Any new questions since I opened the page? Nope. Let's go to my pre-configured questions. We'll be finishing up soon anyway. How to stop recursive pagination in S3 Paginator. So when you run a list objects command in S3, you only get back 1,000 objects maximum per call. If you want to continue doing it, you can paginate, which means when you make a call to list objects, it comes back with a special key. V2. I'm looking for a command here, list objects v2. And when you get a response back from list objects, it passes you, first of all, I think a Boolean is truncated. So if is truncated is true, it means there are more results, come back for more results. And it gives you this thing called a continuation token. Next continuation, I don't know what that is, a continuation token. And you take that continuation token and you pass it back into the next call as the continuation token. And it carries on the response from where it left off last time. What is next continuation token? The token that, continuation token is the token that was sent with the request. You have to grab the next continuation token, if is truncated to true, and pass it in as the new continuation token. And that way you'll keep getting back 1,000 at a time. Now, if that's a little difficult to do, Boto3, for those of you into Python, contains something called a Paginator. Boto3 Paginator. And here's some sample code. So you do a get Paginator and you tell it the command that you will run with the Paginator, in this case list objects. You then call, instead of calling list objects, you call the Paginator, please paginate, and you pass in the same fields that you would normally pass to list objects. And you can then loop through the results, and it creates a, what do you call that in Python? An iterator. And you can just iterate through the page results and not worry about fetching 1,000 each time. So that's what the, that's what the person has done in this command. They've created Paginator, passed in a prefix and the bucket, and then they can just loop through it each time and do something with that particular object. So they're saying they passed in, they wanted to see something in base path. They're looping through. They wanted base path / something, and they were getting back a subfolder of what was contained within there as well. On reading it, I don't want the files in the process folder to be fetched, but it returns all of them. Now, this brings up the concept of a delimiter and common prefixes. If you, some common prefixes. I don't want the pagination, I want. So common prefixes are similar to directories. I don't want it on there. Let's have a go here. If I go in here and I say AWS S3 API list objects bucket stack bandito 1, will it work? So I get back a whole lot of objects here. If I append a delimiter of / onto that thing, then it is not coming back with it. Let me create one. So there's this thing called common prefixes, which is effectively directories. And if I upload the S3 stack bandito 1, and I'll give it a folder name. A specific bucket does not exist. Bandito. So I've now created a folder within Bandito 1, and inside that folder is a file. And if I'm lucky and I now run my list buckets command, here it is. It comes back with an additional field saying there is a folder called folder. And that only appears if I specify a delimiter. If I don't specify a delimiter and run that command again, it doesn't come back with it. So you've got to specify a delimiter. And it's effectively saying, here is a list of pretend directories, pretend folders that are within that top level. So that's how you can get a list of common prefixes. The problem is, I don't think you can limit the list bucket command to not go deeper within a common prefix. But maybe you can. So I think we did it. So in here, if I run it without the delimiter, and let's just say output contents key, not output, query. Yay. So here it is saying I have all of these objects in here, and there is HTML within that folder. But now if I specify a delimiter, which is a slash, it comes back and yay! It does not contain that. So by specifying a delimiter, you're effectively limiting commands to that specific folder. It can help you. I'm clever. You specify a delimiter. Well, let's say, how would they format it? Delimiter equals slash. Equals slash. Now he used prefix, so I'm a little worried here. Let's test that. If I copy to another subfolder, folder 2, and we run the command again, and I say prefix folder. So I'm now looking at lowercase p. Now looking at null folder slash. Okay, I'm now looking at my folder there. That's good. I specified a prefix and it only showed me the contents within there. If I get rid of delimiter, it will show me the folder within F2 as well. Yep, so it works. If you specify delimiter equals that, then you're not limited to only the specified folder. Excellent. I think we have a victory, and that's pretty good. So, thank you for joining me today. I think that's probably enough fun stuff. Oh, one last thing I'll mention. We have a Stack Overflow room that is available if you want to join the crowd of cool kids who are answering Stack Overflow questions, such as Chris, Stefan, who is Mr. Bob, Jelly, who we saw online before. Oh, I like this little thing. If you want to join us, feel free to join us in the Stack Overflow room and share questions. Otherwise, I highly encourage you to participate on Stack Overflow. At a minimum, if you see an answer that has helped you, give it an uptick. At a maximum, please start answering some questions yourself. You'll have a lot of fun. And I look forward to seeing you same time next week. So broadcasting Sydney time, 10 a.m. on Thursdays now. And also next week, I'll be on the Developers Let's Code. So same time, one day earlier, we'll be looking at Lambda. So a quick 1 hour show on Lambda to get developers up and going very quickly. So thank you very much. And I'll see you all again. Cheerio to all parts of the world you come from. Bye. Burning off.